everyone. We are back now for the last villain in the series, Hades. If you didn't get the chance, make sure you watch the video from this morning doing Oogie Boogie. I apologize, I'm a few minutes starting late. I was scarfing down some food in between. The traceable, is available on Patreon. And as always, we're going to start with our background. And I am going to do a brilliant blue for his background, because I want it to be able to be more differentiated from his hair. And because he's forming the blue for my villain ring, my male villain rainbow. So I'm just going to put some of that brilliant blue on my palette. And I'm not going to use a whole lot because I don't know if I'm going to use a lot of this later. And I don't want to end up with a lot of excess on my palette. And I'm going to start filling in with my 1/2 inch angle brush. Just as I always do. And I'm going to fill in my background. We're not thinking too hard about, anything about the shape of the background yet, because I don't know what kind of design I'm going to want to put back there. I might try to do something like a fire motif, a continuation of that from his hair, but I'm undecided at this point. I just know that my background will be blue, because that's where he fits in my rainbow. And then when I finish with this piece, I'll kind of go one by one through my rainbow up this point, since this is the last piece in that collection before I start planning out next month's theme. Today is the last day to vote in the Patreon poll to select that theme. So make sure that you do that, because my homework tomorrow is to have all of the traceables for next month drawn out and uploaded to Patreon. So that way, anyone who subscribes can have those details all planned out and ready, and figuring out how it's going to work out into their schedule, or when they'll watch a video, or if they'll watch it live, that kind of thing. And I'm able to get pretty close to my line with this angle brush, because I'm just using the side of the brush to do a lot of the work for me. And don't forget your top. Alternatively, you could also paint him as he appears with red hair if you wanted to. I am not, because I prefer the blue. I don't like warm colors as a general rule, but that is an alternative that's out there. If that's something that inspires you personally, go for it. I think a lot of people think of him with blue hair, though. I think that's the most common way to see him, because I think it only flares up red for like a few moments, like when he freaks out that Hercules is still alive. Because Pain and Panic are utterly inept sidekicks, villain sidekicks. They're absolutely fun and I love them, but they're horribly inept as sidekicks. Like, they don't have, the intelligence of, Iago. Iago is, a great villain sidekick. Mostly because he's kind of ambitious. As we're Pain and Panic, I don't know that you'd say that they're ambitious. They just are, sycophants, to be honest. Especially when they do the "we are worms" thing. absolute sycophants. And don't worry about getting like it perfect around his hair, because we are going to mess with this line a little bit, because, well, it won't be a clean line, because it just shouldn't be, not with fire as hair. It's not like traditional hair. He's going to have wispies. He's going to have like little white girl wispies kind of thing happening. Little baby hairs coming off, because, you know, fire is not a smooth line. It kind of glows. So his hair will have to have that same kind of effect. And don't forget your sides as you're kind of going through. I wonder if anyone's ever played like a shooter game and they're like, oh, a headshot, and then they're thinking they mean like a glamour shot. I just happen to think that the whole thing, the word is used both ways. You know, I doubt, you know, it could ever really happen amongst like anyone who regularly plays that genre. But if you were like, I don't know, a makeup influencer, you might think that it's a totally different thing than what they're actually saying. I think that'd be like a hilarious meme, like headshot, okay, and then they pose for a picture. I think that would be hilarious. Somebody do that as a meme. I think that'd be amazing. Okay, and so we've kind of got the base of our background in, and now we're going to fill in I think we're going to start with like the dark line of the toga. He's got kind of this dark teal, so I'm going to take a little bit of teal and mix it with the blue I use for the background, and then dull it out with some gray to kind of make that color. Or maybe I'll just go right to gray and dull the teal down with some gray. It depends on how light it winds up making it. I'm kind of finishing up the last of a tube here, so it is kind of difficult to work out. There we go. And then a little bit of gray. Oh yeah, I think just a little bit of gray right into the teal is sufficient for what we're trying to accomplish. Kind of a muted, deeper shade. We'll actually be able to use this kind of for under his eyes too. So just to make it easier for ourselves, we'll fill all of this in that way, and then we'll go back over when it's dry with the black to add the like striping that's kind of there. But do you see it's kind of muted? It's not bright or vibrant. It's cold and soulless, just like him. Well, that begs the question, I guess. Do Olympian gods have souls? Or were they rumored to have souls? You know? I think that they would have had to, because, I mean, in theory, a god can die. And their, you know, souls would be punished or, you know, rewarded in their afterlife. I'd have to research it. It's been a while since I've dug up the mythology to that level. I'm a big fan of mythology. I used to have a giant encyclopedia of all the different gods and goddesses, and I always joked that I would name all of my pets after them. I haven't. You'd be grateful to know. But there was a time when I would never have considered naming a pet anything other than after a god. And then this little bit over here as well. I'm going to flip this upside down so I can get the bottom and this top corner or this bottom corner over here a little easier. Because this is kind of light and streaky, I'm going to wind up coming back and doing another little layer of this just so that I've got good full coverage on the color I'm wanting. Before I start painting in any of my details or adding texture and value. I recently got caught up on Lore Olympus, the webtoon regarding like the romance of like Hades and Persephone, and I absolutely love it. So amazing. And while I've kind of got this color mixed up, I'm going to go ahead and put in like around his lips and eyes just because it is such a good color for it. And I'm doing this with just a one detail brush. I think I mentioned it in one of the other videos with Dr. Facilier, but I'm wondering why all of the Disney villains have such excessive bags under their eyes. Like, are they that tired? How late are they staying up with their, you know, devious plans and plots? They clearly need to be getting more sleep. Okay, and then over here as well. May as well just get all of this color used up. You may hear my whiny dog in the background. He is officially fed up with being in this room. If it persists, I'll put it on mute and I'll go and fetch a water bottle to help silence the whining. I hesitate to do that just because the temperature is a little bit low here, at least for what we're used to having. And he, like me, is particularly susceptible to cold, but I'm hoping that will also, you know, work in our favor for him to be quiet. But I did take the heat down a little bit, so it should be okay. He should be all right. Okay. Oh, evidently there was a reason for him to be whining. Someone came home. Hold on just a moment, guys. Thank you for your patience. We have someone coming to kind of look at our roof and see if maybe we can get, you know, a roof done through our insurance. So Paul was coming home to make sure he was at the door for that. So at least he was whining with reason. He wasn't, you know, being a jerk, although he's usually just being a jerk. Okay, and then I'm going to do his like upper like lip as well. And I'm going to switch to a smaller detail brush for that. Just because I don't want to accidentally clip his nose. Like this is a snarl here. Okay, and we're just going to continue working on filling in the upper lip. And we're going to do the bottom lip as well. I'm going to turn my canvas upside down so I can get to the bottom lip a little easier. So I've got kind of the base layer for his super baggy eyes and whatnot. So now we're going to go ahead and fill in his skin. And his skin is going to be like a really soft gray. But I will go through and with straight gray outline where the face is, and then I'm going to add some white to my gray so that way I don't lose my lines here. And these don't have to be perfect because we're going to smear the lines a little bit when we add in the lighter gray, but we just want to preserve this very unique chin shape. We don't want it to get lost because then he'd be less identifiable as Hades. So for now, we're just going to go ahead and just fill in our lines. And if it helps, anchor your elbow down in front of your canvas so that way it'll keep you from wanting to rest your wrist on your painting. I know I'm super guilty of resting my hand right in the middle of my artwork. And then you have to let it dry so that way you can fix where it's gotten smeared or whatever.
Is that good for you?
Yes, that's good for me. Very cool. I will get that organized later. My husband brought home something cool for me that I can use to organize smaller canvases and then be on like a little turnstile. So I'm super excited to bring that to market because I think that might be easier to display those on than on tables. So I'm very, very excited about that. My next market will be the February Leesburg market. My market for January was canceled because of COVID. But I'm looking forward to this next market, making sure I'm prepared for it. I had sold out of virtually everything at the hometown Christmas in Fruitland Park back in December, and so I've been needing to work on upping my inventory so that way I make sure I have enough to sell. So I was very blessed, but it did create a lot of work for me. So I'm very, very excited about it. About the enthusiasm for this. And he does have, like, unlike some of the other noses for the villains, his is a very, like, well, we'll go with just sharp. He's got a beak-like nose. And most of the others have had, like, ginormous schnozzes, like, absolutely huge. But Hades is a little bit different. His is a little more beak-like, a little more straight to the point, no pun intended. It just makes his face a unique face amongst, you know, the Disney villains. And I'm going to go ahead and outline most of his face as well, because that'll help differentiate where parts of his face end and begin. But I will not mess with his gum line or his teeth just yet, because I don't want to mess with that spot, because it won't be outlined in gray. It'll ultimately, the stuff will move around. It can stay over there.
And it's on wheels.
Nice. We also got this like little rolling cart thing that has a pull-out tray on it that's on wheels, so that way, you know, I can put things under there and roll it in and out and have more storage underneath my desk area. So I'm super excited about that. And I see when I kind of put my background in, I did not get over here really good, so I'm going to grab that real quick while I'm right here. Just get that cleaned up a tiny bit. And finish putting in my lines. And then over here, I am not going to do his hairline because I will be using solely the color for his hair for that. Because your skin color is not in your hair, so that doesn't really make sense to do that. Alright, so we've got our kind of our lines in, and now we're going to go ahead and lighten up our gray by adding a little bit of white. And we're going to create a light gray. And I'm just going to kind of brush it onto the canvas. I'm not going to mix it all on my palette because I kind of want to see some of that gradation, you know, appear on his skin. I know I'm going to go over it with more detail, but your skin is not all one shade. It's never all going to catch the light all the same way. So it's important to see that different value there. And I'm trying to keep my brush strokes kind of going along where my existing lines are, because, you know, your face would have, it may not be all the same color, but it will be mostly the same kind of texture, and light will hit the lines of your face a certain kind of way. And it's important for those to be consistent. So in this case, we're going to follow along kind of like the shape of where his neck would be. And I'm going to flip it so I can get the corner a little easier. And if a little blue winds up in your paint for some reason, you know, that's fine. His skin is a cool color, so that would be something that would naturally make sense. It might have a bluish hue to it. I wouldn't say go so far as to do it on purpose, but if it happens, it would be more of a happy accident. And don't worry if you obscure your line a little bit. We will go back and re-emphasize those. That was just more so they didn't get lost in this phase of your painting. And now I'm going to work on the other side of his face. And again, it's okay if you partially obscure some of your lines, as long as you can still kind of see where they were, so that way you can add them back. And I am intentionally letting this side be a little darker, because the light is going to be hitting his chin a little lighter, and I want to be able for you to be able to see dimensionally that his chin is in front of his neck. So the neck should naturally have more shadow there than anywhere else on the face. And just make sure your brush strokes are consistent in their direction. And don't forget the side of your canvas. Right, and now I'm going to do it over here. And again, because this part of his body is, you know, behind his face, it should be darker. We'll probably touch up our color a little bit there, but we're going to go ahead and flip back over and continue working on filling in, you know, over here on the shoulder, and then starting to fill in the actual face. add just a little bit of white there because the light would probably hit this side of his neck a little bit. And I do want some of that kind of gradation there. But not all the way up at the top, just kind of over here. And now we'll go ahead and start filling in his face. And because this is a little bit of a smaller area, I'm going to switch over first to my 1 round. And I'm probably going to have to add a little more white to this because it is not quite light enough for there to be enough value there. So I did just kind of throw some white just directly on my canvas to spread around. And again, don't worry if you lose your lines a little bit, we'll add them back. These are more for our initial guidelines. Do make sure that if you've got a lot of excess paint, on your canvas, that you are moving it around and letting it spread out instead of becoming a little bit chunky. We're not looking to do that effect yet. That's a little bit later. So I'm going to take some of the globs that I've got a little extra from where I added the white on and kind of work parts of it into different parts of his face. Pick up some of that extra white and work on kind of spreading it out. Okay, now that I've kind of got that the way I want, I'm going to switch over to my smallest detail brush because now it's getting really tight. It's getting really hard to work in the space without smearing it all over. And I'm going to work a little more white into it because it's gotten kind of dark again. And I don't want that. I want the face to look, well, if I'm totally honest, kind of on the dead side. We want his face to look kind of dead. He's the god of the dead. He's the lord of the underworld. His face is going to kind of tell that story about it. If you are really struggling not to rest your hand on your canvas, go ahead and stop and dry it. I'm not quite there yet, but I know I'm going to get close here pretty soon when I get to the details in the middle of this face. And I'm just kind of filling in those details, and I'm trying really hard not to lose too much of my lines in my nose. And I'm going to make sure that I kind of stroke this way coming up so that we can kind of tell that, the skin is going around the eye. So it's going to have movement that's going around that shape. I want to give a shout out to my friend Becky and their family. They're going through some hard things today, so I'm sending some pixie dust their way. Special love and, thoughts for the family. If you can spare, a happy thought or a prayer for someone you don't know, We're praying for Becky's family. Or whatever, you know, however you put good vibes out into the universe. That's all we're about here, is putting good vibes out into the universe. Even when we're painting demonic, you know, things like Hades, we're putting good vibes out in the universe. That's what we're here for. And I'm going to paint back in that curly part of his ear, the inner ear. It was just really hard to kind of fill that space without covering it a little bit. So we'll go back in and add that later. I've been meaning to want to do like a giant like 3-foot canvas with a concept of like positive vibes only. I have a giant like space that I can, you know, hang art up at work. But I've been struggling to think of what I would want to put there, because it would be the largest piece I've worked on since my last custom commission. And I'm just kind of struggling with what I think I want to go there that would represent me in our office space. Because yes, I do work a standard 9 to 5 job when I'm not doing this. This is what I do to relax and to make, you know, a little bit of extra income. As well as being a long-standing hobby. I've been painting for about, I don't know, 7, 8 years. I enjoy it a lot. It brings me a lot of peace, provided I'm not, you know, working on a crunch. Then it's not so much peace as stress, but that's true for any hobby when you're doing it because you want to do it, or if you're doing it because you have to do it. You know, I think that's true for anything. Whenever you're working on a deadline, it makes things that are inherently enjoyable more stressful than they would otherwise be. And that's particularly true for anything that's time consuming to do, whether you're crocheting or painting or sewing or, you know, any other crafting discipline. If you do Cricut and you have to weed something that's got a ton of, you know, details in it, you know, that can, if you're working on a deadline, can be stressful rather than enjoyable. So I definitely encourage, you know, do things that you want to do as your hobby and try not to let it become too much of, you know, a job for you. That would be my 2 cents on that subject. If it's something that you're doing for money and you're still enjoying it, then you are doing the best you can for yourself. And we're almost done filling in his face. And then we'll do the first layer of his hair and start filling in his mouth.
Yep.
And so we've got his face filled in. Now we're going to start his hair. So his hair is sort of like a true blue. And then it kind of goes to like a cerulean. So I'm going to take a little bit of the blue that we used for the background, and we'll wind up having to stick another layer on that because it's quite transparent and I want it to be kind of rich in color. So we're going to take that blue and some white, and we're going to mix it together to kind of create a nice medium blue. Like, this is what we're aiming for. And we're going to go ahead and fill it in. I'm not going to stick using this brush, but I used it to mix my paint, so I just wanted to pull it off.
See you later.
go back to my 1 inch round, or my 1 round, not my 1 inch round, you know what I mean, hopefully. My 1 round. And I'm going to start filling in the base layer of the base of his hair. And I'm going to worry about the directionality after I get the color in, and then I'll worry about fixing the brush strokes, because the brush strokes should be coming up out of his hairline, just like it would for anybody else. And just continuing to fill in that space. And for this part, it should kind of be coming out, kind of brushing away to the right, since this would be coming up off the nape of his neck. Makes me wonder, does his back hair have fire? Like, if he had a beard, would his beard be on fire? Like, inquiring minds want to know. Does the Lord of the Underworld have back hair? And is it on fire? Now we want to be quick about filling in this line where we're going to add in that other shade of blue, because we're going to need these two colors to merge together a little bit. So I'm going to try and kind of get that cleaned up quickly, because I can't let this dry. So we fixed our strokes there, and I just got to do over here real quick. And then we'll add in that sort of like softer cyan kind of shade. I'm going to rinse my brush. Now we're going to add this lighter shade of blue. Because, you know, fire has like levels to it. Like even a blue flame is not like one shade of blue. And before I kind of blur those lines a little bit, I want to get the rest of my paint down. We'll add little wispies on the end using a fan brush when we're finished placing our color in. And directionality matters here too, so once you've kind of got your paint in, smooth it into the strokes that would be coming off of this darker blue and kind of blend them up. had done like a 1930s Hades dress last year as part of my villain challenge for sewing. I had made it out of like a gray bed sheet, and it was amazing. All right, so now that we've kind of got our colors in, we're going to start blurring these lines a little bit. We're going to drag this kind of, the colors kind of back and forth a little bit to kind of mess up these lines. We don't want these lines to be so smooth. And we're going to smear this where we've picked up some of that lighter color down a little bit. But you see we've kind of created a little bit of a thing there. Kind of blended it just a little bit. And now we're going to take our fan brush and dip it into our light color. And we're going to kind of just kind of brush along the edges a little bit. This is just going to just help like define where like the light changes a little bit. And this part kind of got a little darker than I wanted, so I'm just going to tap real quick there. We're just trying to thin out a little bit where that line is, where one shade of blue meets the other. We're just kind of creating this idea of change in the color, just to help make it a little more smooth. All right, now having done that, we're going to do that along the edge of our hair as well. We're going to give them a little bit of wispy. Not a whole lot. We're just going to tap the edge. We're just kind of indicating that the fire is kind of dancing. Just a little bit. His hair moves, it's fluid, it's just like a flame. There's little pieces that come off of it. So we got to make sure we tell the story of that. And then we'll go back and do that for the blue as well, the darker blue. And I'm going to rinse off and do the same for this darker blue along the bottom and along the top there. And I might even go back and add a little bit of white where those ends are. And I kind of got a little too much and I tapped where I shouldn't. But that's okay, it's an easy fix. Rinse. And we're just going to tap over it with our light color. And now it looks like we did it intentionally. Actually, we didn't blend over there at all. So I'm going to actually take my little fan brush without any paint and kind of blur the line a little bit. There. That's better. God, he looks so vacant without his eyes being colored in. He has an absolute vapid, vacant stare. And I'm going to put a little bit of my light blue back on, and I'm going to touch up over here, add a little bit of wispy wispy. And I'm going to add a little bit of white into the lightest part of his blue hair. I'm just kind of tapping it on towards the end. It's a small detail, but it is a detail that when you make up the sum of the whole, adds a lot of value and texture. Those are my favorite words, by the way, if you haven't noticed, value and texture. And we're going to do a little bit of that value and texture of the light blue down where the dark blue is. Just a little. We're going to add a lot more detail in there later. So this is just kind of a little bit of a base layer. For that immensely cool hair. All right, now we're going to do the inside of his mouth. The inside of his mouth is a really like cavernous gray. So I'm just going to use straight gray there. And I didn't do his skin color there, but that should be his skin color. So I will go back and do that in a moment. You want to make sure you don't do where his tongue is. I don't think any of the other villains have like sharp teeth like this either. Like I think he's unique in that aspect as well. At least amongst the Disney villains. This is definitely going to require another layer for this to be dark enough and to avoid streaking, but that is a good start. And I'm going to just do this little bit of skin color that is here. That I missed earlier. Where I guess we're seeing like the backside, and this isn't really so much a continuation of his jaw, but more of like a shadow of his neckline there. So we're going to adjust that a tiny bit so that's more noticeable and create a greater differentiation. We're going to slide that line over from its original location just a little so that we know that's his neck. That's the other side of his neck. Yes, it's a deviation from the reference image, but I think in this case it is a useful deviation for our purposes. All right, and now we're going to mix a little bit of a red with, actually I'll probably use a scarlet, a quinacridone scarlet to do the tongue. And then we'll wind up mixing it with gray to do the gum line. Actually, we'll use straight scarlet. That should be sufficient. And I'll have you know that it looks very weird to put red on my palette when all I've got up to this point is like blues, grays, and whites. Like it feels very weird to introduce this shade in there, but it's needed, so I'm putting it in there, but I'm doing it under protest. All right, so we're kind of putting his tongue in now. And I'm using my detail brush to do this because I don't want to cover his teeth. It is so hard to cover up red. And we're almost done with the tongue. Now I'm going to take this bit of red and I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white. To make this sort of weird gum color that they've got there. Like he's got a gum line that goes there, and his gum line doesn't come in front of his teeth, so you do want to make sure that you're only getting here along the line. And then up at the top, it kind of goes right up to the lip line. Okay, and then over on this side, kind of just between the teeth. Alright, so we've kind of got that basis in. God, that's actually sort of terrifying. Just his teeth. All right, I'm going to correct some lines a little bit here with some white while I've got it open. Correct the teeth a little bit. Alright, so we've got our mouth in. Absolutely terrifying. Alright, and his yellow in his eyes is sort of like a cad yellow. I'm going to use cadmium yellow deep hue. And this is going to make this look really terrifying, so I apologize in advance. You know, it's going to be eerie. It's an eerie looking picture of Hades. Well, we can agree on that. But before I put this down, I am going to like mess with my white with my line a little bit here to smooth it out before I put the yellow in. So it goes in nicely. And the same with over here. Okay, now I'm going to add in my yellow. And then we're going to rim his eye with the same color we used to make the gum line. Prepare for this to get freaky. Now, I've told you before that yellow is translucent. You can kind of see that here when I'm trying to cover up my watercolor pencil. Where I used blue, it's turned green. That's okay because our pencil is we're going to fill that in black. But this is why I say that it's so important to use like colors for your watercolor pencil that are going to be in your painting when you're doing your traceables, so that way they don't create artificial color bleeds down the line in your painting. Alright, so we've got the yellow in there, and put the yellow in on this side, and I know I already know I'm going to put another layer of yellow down after I dry this, just so that it is a super like sickly jaundiced yellow. That's what we're looking for here. We're looking for jaundiced yellow. We are looking for the Simpsons or Velveeta. This is very much the color of Velveeta. Kraft mac and cheese. This is the game. This is what we're going for. All right, and now the black. And because I'm using so little of this, I'm going to use it direct from my cap. All right, and then the other one. Okay, and we're going to add just a quick little dot in the center of gray, because his eyes aren't actually dead. You can actually like see out of it, so we would see some like light responsiveness, so we're just going to put a quick little gray dot in there. So we have our base layer of Hades in. You could probably count yourself done now if you really wanted to, for the most part, but we're not done. Don't run away yet unless you really are terrified. I'm going to outline his eye in the color that I had left over from doing his jaw, because he does kind of have a red rim around his eye. And it's not like a vibrant red, it's like a fleshy red. So we've got that in, and then on the other side. All right. And now we're going to start our second layers. this is where we're going to add, you know, filling in any lines that we're not liking. We're going to, you know, fill that in, and then we're going to do another layer on our dark turquoise over here on the shoulders. And then we're going to put in our black lines there for just like toga details. And then don't forget your sides. And now that's a nice, like, good solid coverage of that color on that side. And we're just going to do the same thing on the other side real quick. Flip it over. And that way we can get the underside as well. Make sure it's got a good strong color base. And don't forget the sides. All right, so we've got that layer is ready, you know, for its detail. I'm happy with the shading. Next, we're going to kind of go over parts of his skin where I wasn't totally happy with it, like over here where it's kind of super streaky. We're just going to touch that up real quick. And then, you know, don't neglect your sides. You want to make sure that consistency is everywhere. And I am going to add a little bit of like the straight gray just to kind of create some shading there. And then we need to do some of that same work over here. We need to add a little bit more for coverage. And I need to put some more gray on my palette. I have run out. I'm going to mix a little bit of white back into it. And I'm going to quick add another layer here. Again, you want to make sure that it's not all a solid color and that the light looks like it's coming, you know, down off his shoulder. This part should be a little bit darker because it's kind of under his chin. And I'll flip it upside down so we can get the bottom. then I'm going to flip it back up. And then kind of get over here a little bit. All right, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to touch up my colors a little bit, my lines. And now we're going to kind of do into his face a little more. Oop, and you add a little more white. And again, we kind of need the strokes to kind of tell the idea of this eyelid. So when you're putting your paint strokes down, make sure they're going in the directional. And I'm going to clean up part of my line a little bit that got lost there just a moment ago. So you do not want to lose his eyebrow. I'm going to continue to kind of touch up his face a little bit, get some of the streaky lines out, or at least make them where the streaky lines make sense. And same for kind of around this part of his face. We're just kind of doing another layer so that it doesn't look super obvious. We want nice lines. We want good coverage here. And again over by his ear. This place we would expect to see more light, so make sure that you kind of tell the story of that. I'm going to add a little bit of white kind of down the side of his face here. Just because the light would kind of hit there. And we don't really tell that story well enough just yet. Yeah, I'm a little happier with that now. And I'm going to go back in now and put back in my lines after I do a little bit of drying. Actually, before I do that, I think I'm going to touch this up a little more. I don't think this is as light as I want it to be yet. I want this a little lighter. Yeah, much happier with that. Sometimes it just takes a while to get to the kind of tone you're looking for. There we go. Much happier with that part of his face. Still got to finish kind of lightening it up though. It's still a little too dark in some areas. Yes. All right. Now we're ready to finish putting in the lines. I'm much happier with that. It just needed to be lighter. And I think this does too over here. Yeah, we'll go with that. All right, and I'm gonna flip it upside down just because it makes it easier for me to work with and kind of correct my lines. And I'm doing this in a flat gray. And especially here around his nose, you want good lines. Because the architecture of his face is just so impossibly unique. Don't mind my whiny dog in the background. He's just tired of being in this room. And we're almost kind of done finishing, like working on his lines. I'm gonna wait until my hand is right side up to finish the little curly Q inside his ear, because I mentally can't think about it upside down and get it right. If you can, that's amazing for you. I just know my limitations. Got that little bit of that curly Q back in his ear, and I'm kind of redraw in this shoulder line. And this little bit of his chin line. And then now over here, we're going to fix this chin line. You need to make it very pronounced. And then over here, in the sides, the upper part of this shoulder, and this kind of newly established like shoulder line. And we're gonna do another layer on the inside of his mouth so that way it looks like super dark in there. Hopefully everyone is staying warm. I just got a notification that the temperature dropped again. So it is very cold outside. At least for me. Okay, so I'm much happier with how that's looking right now. And I need to do a quick touch up on this side where we discovered that this was actually meant to be like his skin there. So we just gotta fix that real quick. There we go. Much more defined now. And a quick little touch up here in his gums, I think. There. And then we'll do another quick layer on this scarlet, so that way it's very like deep in hue. There we go. And then another round of the yellow. So that it's super disgusting to look at, if I'm being totally honest. And then another layer on other side. Because I got a little small by accident there, so we're going to add that back real quick. And I'm using so little of the black, I'm just going to do it directly from the cap. Bless you, Luna. My doggy just sneezed. She is okay. There we go. And put a little dot back in there in the center. Okay, so our base layer is in. You could walk away now and count yourself done. We're not gonna, but you could. All right, now we're gonna put in, oh, I guess I wasn't done with the black. We're gonna put in the black little details. And this kind of follows the line here. So we're going to kind of go over where we put the outline of where the skin is. And we're going to replace that with black. And this should be a pretty thick line. And we're going to flip this upside down to make this easier to get to. Because this needs to continue along the bottom as well. All right. And then we're going to do a corresponding line that's about this thick. Oh blast. I just made a whoopsie. It should have been over there. So I'm going to paint this over real quick with my brush. I got too into what I was doing and wasn't paying attention. So now I got to get rid of this. It happens. It happens to the best of us. Mistakes happen. This is what you would do for that. Hopefully you noticed right away that I was making a whoopsie and didn't do that. But if you didn't, you can do the same as I'm doing now. Just kind of cover over it. And then add back in some like white details. Mistakes are not the end of the world. They happen. They usually happen to me, but they happen. And put that line back in. All right, now we're going to put the line in the correct place, which is over here. Mistakes happen. We are all human. And I'm going to turn it this way to make it easier to get to. Pardon me a moment. I am going to go get the spray bottle because the puggle is crying. I now have ammunition to help keep the puggle quiet. We'll clean this line up a little bit with a little bit of water, but for now I just wanted to get it in there. And I'm going to add a little bit of water to my brush with the black, and we're going to smooth the line so there's not a bunch of little bumps. Okay, and now we're basically going to draw a zigzag between those two things. Like a long zigzag though, like it's not like a narrow one. And we'll clean the lines up a little bit at the end. For now, I'm just kind of placing them in there. Alright, now I'm going to thicken the lines up just a little bit and get them a little more even. Add a little bit of water if you're having a hard time getting a clean line. Okay, and there's one side done. And now for the other side. We won't see a lot of it on the other side, but we still should include it in there. And again, we're going to cover up this gray line. And just make it a nice thick black line there. And then kind of another line right about there. And make sure it continues from the bottom and around the side. I'm going to turn my canvas a little bit so I can get a little better access. Right, and then we're going to do the triangles or the zigzags on this side too. And they should be a little bit less noticeable just because there's a lot less space with which to put them in. And I'm just going to clean up the line a little bit. And kind of touch up this corner. And turn my canvas back around. And now we're going to start kind of disappearing some of the lines in the background. So we're going to put down some more brilliant blue. And we're just going to quick stroke it on. It doesn't have to be perfect because remember we are going to add some like details to our backgrounds. We'll add some fun stuff going on there. We just want to make sure it's nice and dark. You won't want to get too close to your hair though. You'll want to avoid that. But get as close as you can anywhere else. I think Hades is one of my favorite villains. Not just because he's blue, and blue is my favorite color, but he's so funny, like 2 thumbs, way, way up. Like he's just good. Like he's good at being a villain. And for like around his hair, I'm just kind of dabbing away from it because I don't want to get up close. And then adding that kind of creates this additional texture of like his hair, like having little flamey bits that are jumping off of it. So don't do that with a flat line. Definitely try to make that kind of spongy. And it looks like I put down just enough blue to do the job here. So go me. All right, so now we're going to dry our canvas. Alright, and now we're going to start adding our fun texture and detailing. So first things first, I'm actually going to start off from the bottom. No, that's not smart. I'm going to start from the top. And I had started adding a little bit of like brush detail with little dots with the fan brush. But now I'm going to add just a couple of like straight white lines. Kind of going in the same direction. Doesn't have to be like overdone. We're just kind of putting some in there. And we're only doing this where that lightest blue is. All right, now we're going to take that light blue and use those lines down into this darker blue. And the lines should all kind of come up from his scalp. Like in the way that the direction is coming from. And we're just going to keep kind of letting it come off of his scalp, kind of going into the direction of the hair, the flame, excuse me. In this case, you know, the two are one and the same, but best to be accurate. You could, in theory, do this with the fan brush if you wanted. It would give it a little bit different kind of texture, but you could do that if you really wanted. Right, and that's kind of it for the first layer of texture for the hair. I'm actually going to use some like straight teal for down around his eyes to create some texture there. It's the last place in the world I'd personally want texture on my face, but we're not talking about my face here now, are we? We're talking about Hades' face. And we're going to do the same thing in his lips. And we'll do the same thing with this straight teal in his little sleeves here. And we'll follow the lines of the zigzags. And then for the main part of the sleeve, we will just have it go kind of diagonal following the line of the black trim. Okay, and then we'll do the same on the other side. Following the zigzag. And there's a little less room for that over there, but we are still going to put some of it in there. Okay. And now we'll use some of the darker gray following along the lines of the face that we've outlined. We won't use that everywhere, but we will use it along the sides. I'll probably have to put some more gray down on my palette because I have run out. And being that this is the principal color for his face, we're going to wind up using quite a lot of it. And the lines in this way are going to come down in this direction because we're kind of telling the story of this jaw. And we will go ahead and do the whole thing. I think it works nicely. We'll go back in and add some lighter gray and some white in there too. Maybe that one would be as dots, since the white would probably be the top layer. And then over here we're going to go straight down. And then kind of curve it. And then don't forget to do the sides. And we're going to do his face a little bit too. And we're not going to use this dark gray everywhere, but we will use it in some places. Kind of just working our way around. And I think that's good for this dark gray. I'm going to switch over to kind of a lighter gray. To kind of do over here. And we're going to use the same up here. And a little over here. And we're going to use a little bit of this light gray kind of over in this direction as well. And we're not being very strategic about this. We're just trying to kind of lighten up part of it. And it can cover up parts of the first layer. It doesn't matter if it does or doesn't. Ideally, we'd see a couple of spots where you would see 3 different shades of gray. That's kind of what we're aiming for here. And then of course we're going to do the same on the other side, and this should look much lighter than anything that's ever, been presented on that side yet. And then don't forget the sides. Right, and at this point we're ready to add a couple of like straight white lines. Okay, and now up here on the shoulder. And now we're going to add some of this over on this side. And then don't forget on the sides. And we're going to do some of this here in the chin. And then along in the ears and face. and all along the forehead. And into the arch of his eyes. With that done, because that was the bulk of the work here is in his face. I'm just gonna touch up his teeth a tiny bit, and I think I'm gonna use some of this white kind of in his eyes. And the same on the other side. And I think I'm going to use a little bit of gray in these thick black lines on his embroidery. We're approaching almost done. We would just kind of have the background to really go here pretty soon. And I'm going to add the lines over here on this side of the black embroidery too. And I think I'm going to use a little bit of this light blue from his hair, kind of around his eye as well. Just because I have it, it's on my palette, it's there, and it kind of goes. And we'll do it on this side too. And on his lips. And I think I'm going to use some of this light blue down in the blue in his toga as well. And on the shoulder. And don't forget your sides. And then on the other side. Alright, and I think we're going to go a layer darker in his hair too. So I'm going to take some basic primary blue and put that on my palette. Because because I think I want to add it as a layer in the darker part of his hair. Just to kind of deepen it up a little bit. And so we've got our blue in. The only thing we really have left to do is our backgrounds. And I think I've decided to do a kind of an almost fire motif. Almost. And I'm going to outline it in white first. I'm kind of going to have it go up and down. And then I'll have it kind of topping up off here and then coming back down again. And there'll be like a hint of it coming down here like that. And then coming up to there and then kind of coming down off the side. So I'm going to do it in the same kind of layout as I've done everything else, where it gets a little lighter to a little darker. So I'm going to put a few little bits of white there. My dogs think it's dinner time. I'm ignoring them because they have another hour. And now I'm going to do a light layer of blue. And just like with the white, I'm going to do it in twos. And it doesn't quite make it to two over there, but I will continue it on down here, where it would have room for two. And now we'll do a slightly less deep shade, as we did with his hair. And again, we'll do it in a little layer of two. There's not really super room for it up here, so we'll just add like the idea of it there. And then let it come down here. For 2 layers there. And then we will do a layer of brilliant blue, which should look pretty dark on here. It may not even really be all that noticeable, but that's kind of what we're going for. And now for the remaining part, we are going to do swirls of the phthalo blue, which should make that, what the existing blue, look a little darker. And we will do these in swirls. And we will add some of the